So Nick, in the last interview, you told us the research behind your Future Trends paper, and you said there are 4 trends. So this one, I want to get to the meat. So what are these 4 trends? All right, and tell us a little more about each one of these.
Sure. So the first one is, in some ways, the most complex, but I also think the most interesting to me, anyway. And it's this idea. I asked people, what do you think needs to be phased out? And so many of the people said competencies, 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 competencies.
It's fascinating.
That's what I thought. I based my whole career on
competencies. Good luck with your new career.
So I was asking, and as I dug a bit deeper into it, it turned out it wasn't so much they thought no more competencies, they just thought that competencies alone wasn't sufficient. And so I started to look deeper, and what I found is there's actually, the reason people are frustrated, there's 2 types of development which leaders can experience. The first is what we might call horizontal development. It's around attaining new skills and knowledge. The second type is called vertical development. And vertical development is advancing sort of the stages of complexity in which we think. So I'll go into it a bit more. So horizontal development's a bit like our traditional competencies, and one way of thinking of it is through a metaphor. So if you can imagine a cup, and traditional leadership development, horizontal programs, they aim to fill this leader's cup up with new knowledge. So if the cup is the leader's mind, so they'll pour in stuff around, here's how you do strategy, here's how you do delegation, here's how you do all this stuff. And as me and you know, feedback, right. As you and I know, a lot of the leaders, they already know this stuff. The problem is they're just not doing it. So that's horizontal development, and that's important. The vertical development is less around what are you going to pour into the leader's mind. It's more around how do you grow the leader's mind itself. So the aim is to increase the size of the cup. And so where this came from is researchers like Robert Keegan at Harvard and Bill Talbot at Boston University, and there's been more previous. But the idea is that people's thinking goes through stages. And we know this through children, right? So you've got 3, and it seems like there's more coming.
Yeah, no, thank you. Good.
So, you and I have both seen that the children, they go through stages in the way they think. So, your 5-year-old can think in more complex ways than your 3-year-old. It doesn't make him a better person, or you love him more, or anything like that. Sometimes less. It just means that he can do more sophisticated things with his mind. And it was always assumed that once adults reach about 20 years old, they are grown up, as in they stop growing. And Keegan and others have found that's not the case. Adults do continue to go through these thinking stages, and at each stage they can think in more complex and sophisticated ways. And so this matters because of this VUCA world.
Right.
When the world is incredibly complex and with a lot of ambiguity, you need to be able to think in a way which is equal or exceeds that level of complexity.
So this is difficult when I'm listening to you here. So thinking about what is vertical leadership development then? If we're not giving people competencies, what can we do to get the glass, change the shape of the glass, as you're saying?
Sure. So what we need to do is think less around what content do I want to pour into you, and we need to help you go through 3 stages of vertical development. This is what leaders need. Step 1 is they need to be able to see the mindset through which they currently see the world. So this is it's not just behaviours, it's getting below sort of the sea level to see what's underneath, which is what are the beliefs, what are the values, what are the mental models I have in my head through which I filter the whole world. And most of us are completely oblivious to them.
That would be me.
Right.
I'm going to have to go through one of your courses.
So most leaders, they can't see it. They just see, the way I see the world is reality. But it's not. It's filtered through so many different mental models and beliefs. So step 1 is you need to be able to get some distance on your own thinking and be able to see it. So we do that, here through a lot of different methods. One's 360s, others are personality assessments, others are giving people a whole lot of feedback from a whole lot of angles so that they can start to see their behaviours and their mindset. So step 1 is to see it out there.
Okay.
Step 2 is to be able to discern which of my beliefs and values and mental models are supporting my development and helping me be effective, and which ones do I actually need to let go of or unlearn, because it was helpful for me 10 years ago when I first started in this business.
It was the best practice 10 years ago. Maybe.
That's right,
Okay.
that's right. And now it's actually holding me back. The need to be the hero and the independent achiever and the one who does it all is no longer what is required, that I'm a high-level leader. Now I need to be more strategic.
Okay.
And the third step is new learning. So what happens is once you actually unlearn some of your old ways, your old mental models, it opens up space for you to actually try on some mindsets from a later stage of development. And so, and once you do that, the world starts to look a little different. And people will have experienced this in key transitions in their life when their thinking actually changed, and therefore their behaviours changed, and everything they started to do, took on a new plane.
So you're working with the mind then?
Working with the mind. So it's beliefs and behaviours. So it's not just one of them. You need to do both, and that's how you help people make shifts.
That makes vertical development more sense for me. So,
Right.
So that's the first trend, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
what's the second trend of leadership development?
The second trend is around giving the responsibility for development back to the leaders themselves. So one of the things we've noticed is that a lot of leaders think it's someone else's responsibility to develop them. So it's HR's responsibility, or it's their boss's responsibility, or it's the trainer's responsibility. And so they end up feeling very passive, like they are on a roller coaster and they're just sitting, going along on it, and then they get off at the end and they are finished. And so a lot of people experience programs like that. And what we've actually seen is that development is most effective when the person themselves feels like they own it. So there's a big trend going towards what are the processes you can give people where they work out what they want to work on, but then they drive development and a process over 12 months rather than just say you're going to go to a training course for a week.
So is it like I go to my internal site, here are 15 different leadership programs I can go to and I pick one, or what is that like?
So it's more like you'll go through a program, and at the end of that program there will be a process for you to grab hold of and follow. So I mean, we've talked around transferring the learning before.
Right.
That our leaders choose 1 or 2 areas they want to work on, then they will choose 5 to 6 colleagues or peers around them, and then they'll be going out asking for feed forward and feedback ideas to those people. And so it's more like how do they grab hold of and drive their own development rather than just say, give me a coach, give me a training, this sort of thing.
Yeah,
so
instead of taking, you're trying to participate or give.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, second big trend. What's the third big trend that you see?
This is what we're seeing around. There's a shift between only doing individual leadership development to doing that plus collective development.
Okay, that's another scary term
Right.
for me. So explain what is collective development. How the heck do you do that?
Right. So collective leadership development, I mean, we're seeing with a lot of our clients is that what they're actually requiring is not just a whole lot of individual leaders to go through a program and develop their competencies. Collectively, they need to make a shift in the company, like the culture.
Okay.
So lots of organisations are saying the culture needs to change. And so that's around what's happening in the space between the leaders. So the way we're doing it at CCL, for example, is often we're starting with the senior leadership team and we're making a shift with that collective there. So we'll get them to do a sort of self-diagnosis around what sort of leadership culture do we need here. And often they'll say it needs to be interdependent, it needs to be collaborative, we're working across boundaries of these things. And we'll say, what sort of culture have you got? And they'll say we're risk averse, we're siloed, there's lots of territorial stuff going on. And so once they've done that, we'll work with the senior team so they can make that collective shift so that they are all working together in that way there. And it goes back to the vertical development. It's going to be around what beliefs do they have individually and collectively inside their minds, plus what are the behaviours which they're doing collectively with each other.
Okay.
And what we've found is if you can get it to take shape with that group of people, and then they take it to the middle of the organisation and start, it's leaders developing leaders, that's how you really shift the culture.
Yeah, and it gets me thinking about your second trend about them taking leadership development in their own hands. Because if they're taking their collective shift down and training new leaders, right, they're taking control of it. That's fascinating.
And that's been the big thing we've experienced here is we don't want them to be reliant on us to do it. Otherwise it lasts for as long as we're there and then it stops.
And there's only so many of us, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's staged, we help to start with, but then it's the leaders developing leaders and then it cascades out into the organisation.
Great. So the last trend?
The last trend is around innovation. And so one of the things I heard a lot is the industry itself, I think, has got a little complacent with the methods which have been used. And we've discussed this many times. And so there's this real need for innovation to happen within leadership development. And I was speaking to a Stanford professor around this as part of the research and asking him, how does innovation happen? And he pointed out something which I thought was really fascinating, was innovation is not some lone genius sitting alone coming up with this new idea. It's when old pieces come together in new ways, and often from outside of the industry itself. And so he pointed out Steve Jobs creating the iPod. And so everyone thought Steve Jobs was the inventor of the MP3 player, when in fact he wasn't. The MP3 player had been around a number of years beforehand. But Apple and Jobs did something which hadn't been done before. They took some old pieces and combined them in new ways. And so he's saying, took the music industry, the artists, the technology, and then the storage, and put them all together, which became iTunes, the iPod. He worked out a new way to get the artists to put their music into iTunes, and he worked out new contracts with the record executives. And it was when he put all of that infrastructure together in a new way, that's when the iPod exploded and became a huge seller for Apple. So in terms of leadership development, we've got to look at a whole lot of pieces outside of the way we usually do things. And I looked at hospitals, how do they develop doctors, they go on rounds, things like this, and there was a whole lot of interesting examples from outside of our industry, and I think that's what's needed.
So do you think we need to pull out and learn from not even outside of our own organization, but outside the industry, right? Is that what you're saying?
Am I going that far?
I think it might
learn
be
from
going
people
far.
outside of our industry. Wow,
it's pretty wild out
yeah.
here. That's a trend in the future.
I can feel the cup growing already inside you, Phil.
All right, Nick. Thanks for the 4 trends. And by the way, the paper's pretty darn good, so I have to say that. I'll plug that for you. Thanks for. If not, you could just watch the videos. Thanks, Nick.
All right. Cheers.